Okay. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Does everybody know who I am?
No.
Yes.
Who are you?
I'll tell you. I'm Michael Ochoa. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I am a catechist here. I am also part of this parish and been for maybe 6 or 7 years now. I have been living the parish for that long. One of the things that I do, Father talked about priest, prophet, and king. Everybody remember that? And then in Mike's conversation, he said, we go out and do things. And one of the things that Father did not say, which was he said, oh, yeah, you want to do things, but you want to do service, like St. Vincent de Paul. And absolutely, yes. But there's another large service arm of this church. It's called the Knights of Columbus. And I am a member of the Knights of Columbus. Have been. We have different ordinances, but I used to be lead the council here a few years, and a lot of your RCIA catechisms are in fact nice. My kids is full of Pat, and Jenny is too. Yeah. So, and Bill, of course. Bill is also nice. So, one of the reasons I'm talking to you today, besides telling you who I am, is Mike has asked me to present on baptism. So, baptism, does everybody know? Has anybody been baptized here?
Not here, but not
But
in the
been
church.
baptized. Okay. So baptism is one of the first rites of initiation that the church has. The church meaning Christ's universal church. And the significance of baptism, we're going to talk about today.
Raise your hand.
And I thought before I get too far ahead of myself, what I would do is play a, let me switch back to my screen here. What I'm going to do is switch us over to a small talk given by Catholic Central. Now, if you ever listen to my presentations, I always like to do audio visual because I don't want you to just listen to me, although I want you to listen to me. But this is just another way of reaching out to you. And one of the things I like about Catholic Central is they are orthodox and they're good, solid teachings. And so I'm going to show you that today and show you a small video. So let's start with this. Do you like that video better than Kai and Abby?
Yeah.
Well, Kai and Abby was good. I think it's more to start. But that little understanding of baptism, I think, and it's embedded in the presentation I'll send to you. Sophia Press is one of my go-to resources because they do such a job of both visual and audio. If you're that type of learner, which I am. So, in the Catholic Church, except for necessity, we typically perform baptism on Easter Vigil, and that is meant for adults, typically. Of course, as you know, when infants are born, they are born outside of Easter. So they can be baptized at any time, other than during Lent. But for you will, if you're in your condition where you are going to be baptized, it'll be on Easter Vigil, which is a wonderful day. So, and that's how it might look for you. There'll be a baptismal font in the front of the church, and that's how it will look.
Let me talk about necessity really quick. So normally, like the church, and the church would not say, let's say grandma does a secret baptism of grandchild, okay? Doesn't mean that the baptism is invalid, okay? But the church does not want grandma to baptize. Normally the church wants deacon or father to baptize. But a necessity, you can do a baptism. Let's say that you're witness a car accident and somebody's laying on the street, like in the movie God's Not Dead, like your atheist professor's laying on the street and miraculously he decides he wants to get baptized. You can do the baptism. You don't have, in fact, you don't even have to be a Christian to do the baptism. Anybody, as long as they say, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, can do that baptism.
Yeah,
Yeah, and water. That's it. So, and then oftentimes priests will do baptisms. Like, let's say you're in the hospital, you're Jimmy Hoffa, and he's on his deathbed. The priest isn't going to say, "Well, I need you to go to RCIA for 2 years before I'm going to baptize you." So, he's dying, and if he's dying, the priest will do the baptism right then. He's not going to say, "Wait till Easter Vigil."
Right. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I have a colleague who's a labor and delivery nurse, and she actually has performed emergency baptisms for Catholic parents, who unfortunately go through the tragedy of having like a stillborn or pulseless electrical activity. It's a condition where your heart is producing electricity, but it's not beating.
Mhm.
And yeah, she said she always keeps a shell and some water, like
Yeah.
for in the event something that happens, and the parents want that.
And then, like we mentioned, baptism is a way when you receive sanctifying grace, but God lives outside the sacrament. He can decide. So there is an exception for every rule. And we're going to talk about some of the exceptions, like I think we talked about earlier when I was chatting with Bill. Baptism by blood. Did you guys hear that talked about or remember in your meetings that? Anybody want to explain what the baptism by blood is? Martyrdom. Okay, and martyrdom meaning you're dying for Christ. You're dying because you are not renouncing your faith. You're holding firm to your belief. Baptism by blood is for those who desire for baptism. So Bill gave me an example that he asked. He said, Mike, and if I get wrong, he said, Mike, we got 4 guys in a foxhole, and somebody throws in a hand grenade. And one of those people was not of the Christian faith, and that person jumped on the hand grenade and saved the other 3. Is he baptized by blood? What do you think? You're saying yes?
No.
You're saying no. And I confer with Mike. I'm not saying you're wrong. But here's the thing. Well, I am saying no. But why? Why is it that he's not baptized by blood? I mean, he died for others. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
It didn't have the correct form with the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
No,
He wasn't dying for Christ.
Right. That's really what it is. He jumped on a hand grenade to save his brothers, which is completely noble. And like I said, God lives outside of his own sacraments. He may be saved anyway. But the reason why we say no is because when you die when you're trying to get baptized by blood, that means you want to be baptized, and you are saying a terrorist has their gun to their head. You are not going to be baptized, but I want to be baptized. And here in church, I'm about to be baptized, and he shoots you or something like that, or kills you before you could be.
Imagine the early church again. Back then, if you wanted to be a Christian, RCIA wasn't just 9 months or a year; it was about 3 years. Okay, then you went through this period of examination, instruction. It was a real long RCIA, and there was a real chance in the early years that if the Roman government got a hold of you, they would say, denounce Jesus or die. And those candidates for baptism that the church was not letting to be baptized until their 3 years was up, they would stand up for Jesus and say, I refuse, and they would die. And so the church had this early question because, we got this rule that you're not saved unless you're baptized.
Let me paint a picture for you.
Yeah.
Let me paint a picture. You're living Roman times, and they have this big Colosseum. And in that Colosseum, they're rounding up people who profess to be Christian. Some of them might not be baptized, but they're trying to be. And then they put them out in front of all the gladiators, and they kill them. That's a baptism by blood. Because they wanted to be baptized. They were killed because of their faith, because of their desire to be baptized or not. They were in the process of, and then they got killed for Christ because that's who they represented.
wasn't there a group of nuns that, I can't remember what country it was. I want to say Russia, but I'm probably wrong. That were captured and they wanted them to denounce their religion. And they said no, and they were all killed.
They were already baptized by water.
No, I know. No, I know. But it was just dawned on me that there was a group of nuns.
I think it was South America.
Was it South America? I don't remember.
That's right.
It wasn't the United States.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the example of the thief on the cross, what kind of example was that person? You know, the thief that said, you know, I want to go with you. I don't want to go, you know, don't take me down from the cross, take me to the promised land, because what it said. So would he be considered baptized?
Yes.
Yes.
I think he could. Yeah, absolutely.
So we call that baptism by desire. He didn't die for Christ per se, but he wanted to be baptized, and but for being prevented from being baptized, he would have been.
So this slide, the early and later exceptions, I think is maybe a lot of people have in their mind. I know I did, or do, or have thought about this, and that is, what about those maybe on an island Fiji, or maybe those in Africa who haven't been evangelized? And it's hard to think of that somebody today haven't heard the message of Christ because, you know, airplanes and internet, phone. But I'm sure there's places and regions in the world that might be exceptions to that. Non-Christians as well, you know, those Jewish faith who don't believe in Christ or don't have the grace of God. What about them?
Then
Then what if they don't know? What if they don't know God?
Then you're not responsible for it.
Right. One of the things that I talked about early on.
See, that's what I was going to say. This has to do with the individual's commitment. And yeah, if they don't know, then how could they commit?
Yeah, and that's where we rely on God's grace. God knows the true heart of everybody because He made us,
and that's
whether they are a believer in Him or not.
kind of why one reason why we have all the difficulty in our society nowadays is we go back and judge the past by rules that have been created in the future. And so it's kind of like, yes, they do have some studies, where some arguments that said, well, the Bible was mentioning this, and then I sat down with the guy who was giving me Billy House because he was Korean. And he was, I know he wasn't a Christian, but he was saying Christianity has cannibalism. Sheol is just a burning place outside of town. It's not actually.
Well,
We're
people can have
going back to the private factor of view. You go and say, well, we're going to now say we're going to.
So there's a certain accountability that people have. So depending on his state and his desire to know Christ.
I'm not talking about the friend. I'm talking about just in general the question about.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in my response there, and what I wanted to bring up was those who are not ignorant or chose to remain ignorant when they presented the truth. Do you think that they will be baptized or saved?
They're accountable.
They're accountable, right? So when they become accountable, they start bringing up theological questions and they just stand firm. You know, their sources. Remember we talked about priest and prophet. Prophet means the one who evangelizes, and then Father talked about the right time. Was that Father? The right time, like a fisherman. You know, when you go fishing, you don't go, you know, at particular times of day. Fish by a different time of day, in the morning or in the evening. You don't go to a dry river to fish. You go to a lake or you go to a river where there are fish. So you have to find the right environment to be that prophet. And that, as part of priest, prophet, and king, the value of that and showing others Christ is for you to understand how to reach them. So when you're confronted, like John was talking about, that gentleman who brings up reasons why he's not Catholic, You got to find a way to reach them. But if you can't, what do you do?
Take it to somebody in the future.
Well, you could pass them off. You dust your feet off, or dust, take the dust off your sandals, and you keep going. You say a prayer for them. Hopefully, they will find it. Or you give them to somebody who might be able to reach them. So I know we've been talking about salvation, and really that's what baptism is, right? Would you agree now? Baptism is receiving sanctifying grace. So I'm only have a couple more minutes. So does this mean everyone is saved?
Not everyone.
Nice. Possibly, right? All right. People are ignorant of the gospel, but they're seeking truth. Live the will of God within us, within his understanding. Amen.
Don't trust an exception and a possibility if you can offer someone a certainty. Is that a law school? That's my favorite quote, yeah.
It is recorded.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to make a point about why grandma can't just baptize. Yeah. Through baptism, they're agreeing to live the life. And it's going to make every effort. Whereas if grandma secretly baptizes, there's no effort at home being made. So that's why it's not, or that's one reason why it's not illicit baptism.
So the value of illicit baptism, whether it was grandma or the other, is the fact that we are following the norms of the church because we live within the confines of the church. Now, grandma were on a desert island with her grandson, and that was the only way in which she could be baptized. That would be illicit because there was not a church or a priest there to do it, or a deacon.
Grandma's got to convince the parents.
Grandma has to pray, like Saint Monica did for Augustine, right? I mean, that's what has to happen.
I got in trouble for illicitly baptizing someone after I became a Catholic.
Oh,
But it was a situation where this lady was old, she was housebound, and her daughter was Christian, and she convinced her mom to become a Christian. Mom didn't go to church anywhere, and so she asked me to baptize her, and I did. And I got disciplined by a couple priests for doing that. And their rationale was, my rationale was, hey, she's baptized, she's saved, I'm glad I did it. Their rationale was, well, what church did you baptize her into? What community did you bring her into? It would have been better if you would have talked her into having a priest come over and do the baptism so she would know she was part of the community. This goes back to what you're thinking about grandma's bathtub is when you have a baby baptized by parents, the parents are basically saying, we're going to make an effort to teach little Johnny to be a Catholic and to take him to church and CFF, but you do the secret baby baptism in the bathtub, nobody's taking Johnny to church or whatever. Although you can imagine that grandma's going to have a little Jesus doll, something at. So there's sometimes baptism, it's more than just the salvation aspect, which is important, but it's also the being brought into a membership of the church. And that's why we use clergy to normally do that, is that they represent the church and being brought into the Catholic Church. So it's a really interesting topic. In the end, God's going to judge each person. I have a niece that's a Protestant Christian that sings in the choir. She believes all the right things about God, but she just never got around to getting baptized. So is she going to go to hell if she dies? I don't think so. But that's because her parents are ignorant, and she's ignorant of the necessity of baptism. That God will judge that. I'll send her articles in the meantime to try to get her to change her mind.
and we're just about done. It's quarter to the hour, and the last topic is really, we've covered it. You might have heard it through Kai and Abby, or even from the video I showed earlier about the infant baptism. So I'm not going to go too much in, other than to say one more thing that was a really good point that Kat brought up. And her co-worker performs baptism on maybe a baby still alive, but maybe not going to survive. That is appropriate. That is licit if the baby's alive. If the baby comes out deceased, then that is not a baptism. The baptism has to occur with a live human being. But as I keep saying, God lives outside the sacraments, and His creation was in His image. So, as the Catechism says, as regards to children who have died without baptism, the Church can only entrust them to the mercy of God as she does in her funeral rites for them. And that's so true. And God, we know, is a merciful, loving God. And that's how we put our stock in that. Now, a little bit about baptism. You can take this from the slide later. But infant baptism is not a new concept for the 1980s or 70s or no. Our church has done this from the very beginning. It's even in the Bible where 3,000 were baptized at once. Do you think all of them were just men or women, adults? No. And so, and Saint Hippothos, I'm not going to try. This guy believed that to be true, and he was born in he lived in 170 to 235 AD. Anyway, the church received from the apostles the tradition of giving baptism even to infants. The apostles, to whom were committed the secrets of the divine sacraments, knew there are everyone's innate strains of original sin, which must be washed away through water and the Spirit. And because of that, and this is more about people, babies who die. And anyway, that's really all I had today. I thank you for your time. I hope it was informative. If you have any questions, email me. I will send you these slides out a little later this morning. So thank you, everybody.
Going to have Jeremy Youngers come teach us about the Sacrament of